Good morning, welcome to Di's Home and Garden. If this is the first time you've been to the channel, thank you. Thank you for coming and joining us. And what this channel is all about is home and garden, just as it says. So we make a lot of recipes, we do some crafts, and often we're out in the garden. Now, before we go any further, I have to apologise for the noise that's in the background. I do live in a busy area, and it's a nice day today, so I've got all the windows and doors open, so the noise is actually coming inside. So I do apologise for that, and it just seems today that everybody seems to be out on their motorbikes, so you will hear a bit of noise from time to time. Again, I apologise for that, but anyway, let's get on to it. So today I'm going to be making another family favourite. This is called, now it's under debate what this is called. I decided that I would research this recipe before I did it. This is a recipe that has been handed down from probably my great-grandmother to my grandmother to my mother to me. Now, my mother tells me stories about this because it was something that was cooked quite often when I was a child, and we used to take it to school for our morning tea. So my mother has always called this Barnbrack. B-A-R-N, like a barn, Barnbrack. When I went to research it, I found that it was called Barmbrack with an M. So I don't know what it's supposed to be called. My mother also gave me the story that this was handed down and it was Scottish. So that's where her great-great-grandmother comes from. And I've always believed it. And I used to say to people, oh, this is an old family favourite. It's a Scottish recipe. But when I looked it up, I was told from Google that it's actually an Irish recipe. But it could make sense because my mother's distant relatives did go from Ireland over to Scotland, and then they moved down to Liverpool in England. So it doesn't matter where it's come from, it's delicious. In my research, I found out that the recipe that we're using is not quite the original recipe, but there were so many variations. There are some that use yeast. There are some that use all sorts of different dried fruits. You'll find as we go through this and the ingredients that we use, it is very simple. That's why we used to have it a lot as a kid, and that's why I used to make it a lot for my children, because you don't need anything special. You can just go to your pantry and get out your staples, your flour, sugar, eggs, and sultanas, and some tea. That's all you need for this recipe. So it was something easy that you could whip up, especially if shopping day was coming near, you were getting a bit low on things that you had in the fridge or in the pantry. Always had the staple, so we could always make this. So let's have a look at what ingredients we need, and irrespective of what it's called, you can leave some comments down below. Perhaps you've made this, or it's a recipe that your family have made, and you might call it Barmbrack rather than Barnbrack. It might have another name. You might use yeast, there might be different variations out there. I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear how you actually do it. But this is my family's version of Barnbrack, and I hope you enjoy it. So here's the ingredients that we're going to be using here today, and as you can see, I've got them in two separate piles. The reason for that is I'm making a gluten-free version and I'm making a standard version. So here is the ingredients that we need, and it's the same for both except the flour one is just non-gluten. So we need 4 eggs beaten up, we need 250 grams of sugar, and we need 500 grams of self-raising flour. So there's the standard flour, and over here we've got the same ingredients, and we've got gluten-free flour. And again, I'm using the flour that I get from Woolies because I find that the gluten-free flour from Woolies works very well in baking. For those that aren't familiar with using gluten-free flour, it's made from different ingredients. There's all different sorts of starches that they use, and it depends on what they use as to the results that you get with the particular gluten-free flour that you use. So I have found that the one from Woolies works quite well, so I stick to that. Now, the other thing that you need are your sultanas. Now, I've doubled this recipe. as you can see, I'm making the 2 versions. So in this bowl, there's double the quantity that you'd normally need. So you need 500 grams of sultanas, and you soak that in cold tea. So I've already done that because you soak it overnight. So let's have a look. I'll just get the recipe and we'll have a look and see what it is that we need. You need 500 mils of cold tea, and you soak your half a kilo of either sultanas or mixed fruit. Now, as I said earlier, this is a recipe that probably has been adapted as it's been passed down, and we always used to put sultanas in it. And for myself, I don't generally have a lot of dried mixed fruit on hand, but I always have sultanas. So I like this recipe because it was always one of those recipes that you could just, you've usually got eggs, you've got flour, you've got sugar, and you've got sultanas and tea. So it was something that I didn't have to buy any special ingredients. And when the cupboard was a little bit bare and I needed something for the kids to take to school for their morning tea, I just whipped this up. And because all the ingredients were on hand. So it's a great recipe for that. You're not buying anything special, and it's quite easy to make. So these have, as I said, these have been soaked overnight. The sultanas are nice and plump and juicy, and I've got to divide this into those 2 bowls that are sitting there behind. So here we have our first bowl, and it's just a matter of adding our ingredients. So I'll work on the gluten-free one first and get that out the way, and that way there'll be no less risk of cross-contamination. So we just dump it all in. Oops, I forgot I need to actually sift the flour. So just sift that flour into there. Then we just add the other ingredients. So we're adding the sugar and 4 eggs. We'll just mix that all around. Couldn't be simpler. Well, it could if you went to the shop and bought it. But you know that you've got good ingredients in here, and you know that there's no preservatives and colourings and all the other nasties that you find if you buy stuff from the shop. Now, I always like to have stuff that I can put in the freezer. This freezes really well. So that's all been mixed in now, and the next thing we need to do is to put it into our tins. Now, because I'm going to be freezing this and also giving some of it away, I use these foil tins, and I've marked them on the side with GF so that I know it's gluten-free. And now I need to just oil these. And I just use a little bit of olive oil, which I spray in there. So we'll do that to each one. Just coating the inside with olive oil. You can use a bit of margarine, you can use butter, whatever you like. And then we'll spoon this in. think I might do that the other way. It might be easier. Just that this bowl is quite big and heavy, so let's try and do it that way. There we go. That's enough in there. I'll move that aside and we'll do the next one. Now when you're doing gluten-free and then you're also at the same time doing ones with gluten, you've got to be really careful about cross-contamination. There are some people who can't have any gluten at all. I'm actually gluten intolerant, but it is just that I have something where my body reacts if I do have gluten, but it's not going to cause major issues. After a couple of days I'm okay, but there are some people where they can't have any. So you need to be very strict in the control methods that you use, and one of those is that if we're going to put this into the oven, we'll always put the gluten-free products on the top shelf. If there's any spillover, if there anything happens and it goes into the what's below, it's okay, because nothing's going to get into this gluten-free. But if it was the other way around and we had products with gluten on the top and they spilt and got in here, it could actually, for some people, cause major issues. So we'll get these into the oven, and I'll get the other ones ready to go as well into the oven, but I want to get these ones out of the way first so that nothing happens while I'm making the ones containing gluten. And here we have the gluten ones, and it's just exactly the same process. We're just adding all the ingredients. But this time I'll remember that I need to sift my flour. And again, I can use the same sifter because this is gluten. I've already got all the gluten-free stuff out the way. So this avoids cross-contamination, getting that out of the kitchen or out of the way of this, and none of the gluten will actually get into the gluten-free cakes that we're making. So there you have it. Just needs to be mixed up now. Oops, spilling it out. This bowl's a little bit small. So you can see that the recipe has been doubled, so I can do the gluten-free and the non-gluten. And so it's actually quadruple. This is a double recipe that I always make, so it's written into my recipe book because I usually make one for fresh, one for the freezer. There's no extra work just to make an extra one while you're doing it. So the recipe was already doubled, and I've doubled it again so that we can make both versions of this. Here we go on top with our gluten-free, and you'll notice as I put the other ones in that they're actually in a different size tray. So that's another way that I can ensure that I don't mix them up. And there we go. Again, making sure that the gluten-free are on top. So here we are. I have made the classic mistake of not setting a timer, and I actually forgot about them. So they've cooked a little bit more than I wanted to. I'll get them out the oven and we'll have a better look at them. Okay, here they are. They're not too bad. A little bit more cooked than I would have liked. That one at the back's good. And there we go. And then here are the ones with the gluten in them. Again, as I say, just a slight bit overcooked, but they'll be good. Now what we do, we serve these. We always serve them with butter, lashings of butter. But if you're dairy-free, you could use a dairy-free butter alternative, and they'll still be quite nice. I hope that you enjoyed this recipe. I hope that you give it a try, and whatever it might be called, whether it's called Barnbrack or Barmbrack, it's still delicious, whatever it is.